I was working at the Pentagon and watching them look for bodies. I'm one of just a handful of people that saw the World Trade Center from the air as it was burning. It had me turn to religion for answers, and it didn't satisfy me. So I put it away and ran away from life. When I saw her body in the coffin at the funeral, it was an epiphany for me, and say, that's not Susan. I sat with this new mission. I'm going to connect with Susan's spirit, if it still exists. We come here not for the painful lessons. You come to learn how to make something more beautiful from what is already beautiful, the soul.
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or one-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy. Suzanne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guy. Great to be here.
I really appreciate it. Now, I love to ask this question on the show with everyone, but let's say you were at an intimate dinner party and you sat next to a stranger, and then they ask you what you did for a living. How would you reply?
All right. I would say that I'm a spiritual teacher and an author. And it's really funny when you say that. Sometimes people don't say, oh, what do you write about? And my husband and I will get home and they'll say, wouldn't you want to know? I find it curious about people. But the one thing I don't say right off the bat is that I'm a medium, because I need to feel people out first before I go down that path. So, but spiritual teacher is the main umbrella for sure.
And how do you find that accepted these days? Has it shifted for you over time since you've been teaching?
Oh, absolutely. The spiritual teacher part is well accepted. There's still a lot of people who don't know what a medium is, but that is also becoming more and more accepted, which is lovely.
And how would you explain a medium?
Oh, I'm able to connect with and have conversations with people who have crossed the veil, who have died.
Yeah. That's gives me goosebumps when you say these things. Yeah. I'm curious as well. Then, have you always been open your whole life to mediumship, or is it something that came along? Because I saw in your bio as well, you're a former Navy commander. So I'm thinking, how does a Navy commander end up a spiritual teacher and a medium?
That was a big surprise to me too, and to everybody who knew me then, for sure. Have I always been open to it? I would say I had the same general curiosity as most of us about the afterlife. I had read about mediums. I tried some astral travel when I was in uniform, at night. I'd say to my husband, I got this book. Let's see how if we can do this. I had him hide envelopes in the house with things written in it to see if I could see what was in it. Didn't work at all.
I was going to say, were you successful?
Yeah. No, nothing. Never. I do remember one point though where I was vibrating so much in the middle of the night. My body vibrated. I think the soul was trying to lift out of the body, but this was before I even knew what a soul was, Guy. That was what's so funny. And it freaked me out so much. Boom, the whole thing went away and I just gave up on that. But I never saw spirits, never had any reason to consult a medium until after I was retired from the Navy. So I jokingly tell people, if anybody at that point in my career, at the end of the career, I was the head aide to the head of the United States military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, that's as high as you can go. And if I had told anybody then that I'm going to be a medium someday, well, they would have yanked my security clearance, right? That would have been it.
Yeah. So I'm just curious as well, before we move into that, in those environments, because often I've had corporate people on, I've had actually somebody else from the Navy as well who had a near-death experience and watched himself drowned. And David Bennett. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Got to look
as
him
well.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful human being. And but I'm guessing then, did you have to keep everything hidden, as in terms of your spirituality, in these environments?
Oh, I had none. I had none. This all came about after I retired from the Navy. I was raised with no religion. I was by the book, focus on the career, do the job kind of person. Absolutely. And then I was in the last aircraft in U.S. airspace on 9/11. I was the chairman's aide on that day. And being around I was working at the Pentagon and watching them look for bodies and seeing
Oh, wow.
the devastation up close and personal. We flew over Manhattan. I'm one of just a handful of people that saw the World Trade Center from the air as it was burning. That had me turn to religion for answers. Why are some people in the wrong place at the wrong time? That kind of thing. And it just didn't give me the answers. It didn't satisfy me. So I just kind of shoved that down, put it away, and basically ran away from life because of 9/11. I retired as soon as I was retirement eligible because of 9/11. And my husband and I sailed off into the sunset on our sailboat. Literally, he wasn't running away from life. We both wanted to have the sailing lifestyle, but I definitely was. And then we got this phone call while we were in Croatia. We had sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. We were living that dream. Yeah. And we didn't get a phone call because this was before we had cell phones. This was 2006. We got an email over our single sideband radio in the boat, very antiquated. And it just said, call home when you can. It was my husband's daughter. And we had to wait a day to find a telephone ashore. And he called home. And that's when he found out that his daughter, Susan, my stepdaughter, had been struck and killed by lightning.
Oh.
And so everything that I ran away from on 9/11, suddenly that's other people's pain. I don't need to feel that. And now there was no escaping that horrible pain. And so I started asking the same questions again, and it led me not to religion, to spirituality, and down a path of connecting with spirits that I had no idea would unfold. But I know there was a bigger plan, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel a lot of people are going to benefit from this conversation today, just even sharing that. So what I'm finding and seeing is people are hungry. They can't even figure out what it is they're hungry for. They're struggling where to, I guess, look for guidance, even though it's within all along.
That's right.
How did you start to figure that out for yourself, I guess, or let yourself guide you? What opened you?
I will tell you, but when you say that, I can just put it in the nutshell what everybody's hungry for. They're hungry for fullness because they're empty. They're feeling empty. They're looking for wholeness, but don't realize that they don't feel whole. And so you know how, and we'll talk about it, and I found that way to find the fullness by trying to connect with my stepdaughter, Susan, after she passed. When I saw her body in the coffin at the funeral, it was an epiphany for me to look and say, that's not Susan. It was so different. So what was it that made her alive? That's what I knew I had to find. There has to be a spirit that enlivens the body, because this is not just, this is not Susan. And so I started meditating, and I set the goal. I'm going to meditate to connect with Susan, not to help myself. I had no idea how that would transform my life. I sat with this new mission. I'm going to connect with Susan's spirit, if it still exists, and I somehow knew it did. And I'm going to help my husband to know she's still around, because he was devastated, and that devastated me. We were both devastated, but to see him hurting like that, that killed me. So I just sat daily and just one focus, not focus on the breath, not focus on my thoughts. I'm just sitting there saying, okay, Susan, where are you? Show yourself to me. And the rest is
Wow.
history. Yeah.
Wow. And do you recall the moment that you connected?
I do. And I teach mediumship now. I've taught thousands of people to connect across the veil. And at first I wasn't telling people how long it took. And I'll tell you in a minute. I remember it very clearly. But what's important is, even though it took a long time, it's what happened between her death and the time she showed up that changed my life. She came to me, by now it's about 2 years ago, very clearly, and said, I wasn't supposed to come to you right away. You had to learn all those other things first. She deliberately
Huh.
held back. And I'm grateful for that. But it was 3 years of meditating daily. And here I am just one day, just waiting again, you hear? And boom. I couldn't see her, but I felt her step in, and her voice, as if I had just picked up the phone, the same voice. When I connect with other people's loved ones now, they sound like my own thoughts most of the time. Unless I've met them, then it's much easier for them to recreate the exact tone of the voice. But this was Susan. She just said, hey, Suzanne, just like she always did when she saw me. And then she had a message for her dad. And I was crying because there was no doubt in my mind this was her. This was not, there was no way it was imagination. It was a visit. But I knew that I was going to come out of that meditation and say to my husband, Ty, Susan's here. She finally came. She's really here. And he would just pat me and say, that's nice, honey. He would like to believe that I believe, but he wouldn't believe. But I had learned by that point that those across the veil love to show us they're really here. You can ask them to prove it. So I asked her to show me some things, tell me some things that I couldn't know about her biological mother. And she gave me 3 things, very specific things. So when I came out of the meditation and told my husband, I said, we need to call your ex-wife and ask her a few things. And we called her immediately. She validated all 3. And she's visited since then, but that was it. But by that time, I had already started down the path of mediumship, and there was no turning back.
Wow. Wow. Was your, and that just going off on a sidetrack, because I think about partners as well, that, because quite often we see is that somebody is very keen or eager to learn more and dive deep within themselves, but then the partner tends to resist and think, what's going on? Am I losing my partner? They've gone off on a tangent.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the case with you and your husband, or was he just open the whole way?
First, I'll tell you that he's a retired Navy destroyer captain. He was even more by the book than I am. And he couldn't deny the kinds of evidence I was getting when I connected across the veil, and the experiences I had, not just with people's loved ones, but with archangels, with Jesus. The evidence is irrefutable, and he knows me, and he knows I don't lie. He knows I don't exaggerate. So he absolutely has believed and trusted everything that's happened along the way. But he's the first to say that he's not a new age kind of guy. That's what he says. He jokes and says, I'm a new age kind of guy, but he knows he's not. And even yesterday, he said that for him, the world is black and white. And for me, it's gray. And so that's been a challenge, but he supports me 100%. And he sees how this has helped people, literally saved dozens of lives, my work. He sees that. And I think that he has some very strong views about the world that he would like to express, like in a blog or something. And he stopped blogging because he doesn't want to taint in any way my work by people associating his views with mine. He's amazing in that way.
Wow. Yeah. Beautiful. So I'm assuming then you must have worked with many, many people now in that mediumship role. So do people come to see you to connect with people that have passed over?
I'm not a full-time medium at all anymore. I'm so much more the spiritual teacher. I do probably 4 readings a week. I'll do one a day on the days when I'm not doing other interviews and writing and things like that. I do that to really keep that connection going strong with the spirit world.
Mm-hmm.
I do that because the evidence and the stories that come from the readings give weight to the teaching. But for me, I know my path is to show people who we really are. In fact, I teach what I call the awakened way of living. And it's all a result of what I've learned from connecting with spirit. It's nothing new at all. And anybody will tell you there's nothing new spiritually. It's just a different way of putting it together in a way that people can wrap their hearts around.
Yeah, beautiful. And I only ask because you must have some stories to tell, and like you must have had some quite profound experiences with other people. Would you mind sharing a couple that stood out?
One that pops out right away was when a woman in my community asked for a session, and she sat down with me and she told me that her doctor recommended a reading with me, and I was stunned. Really, a doctor, first of all, that the doctor even knew there was a medium in the community and sent her to me. And it's because the woman was in such a state of depression, the doctor couldn't help her anymore. So she didn't tell me why she wanted to see me. I tuned in, and right away I said, "Oh, there's a man here who tells me he's your husband." And I can tell from the pain in my head, I literally get their physical symptoms in my own body, that he passed from an aneurysm. And her eyes are big, and she says, "Yes." And I said, "And he's telling me now he's so proud of you because you're going on a trip to England and it's the first time you've traveled since he passed." And she looked at me and she said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because he's right here and he knows that." And the reading went on like that. And as we were getting ready to wrap it up, I said, "Your husband wants me to say very clearly, don't you dare take those pills in your purse." And she looked at me stunned and she said, "Nobody knows that I stopped at the drugstore on the way here because if I didn't hear from my husband, I was going to take all of them." She was just ready to leave. And I'm really glad I didn't know that in advance, but I can often tell when someone is suicidal in a session because their loved ones know and they tell me. And I'll just say right up front, your own loved one knows you want to take your own life, and that's really not a good idea. And let's talk about why. So these get very personal very quickly. It's profound.
I can only imagine. Wow.
Yeah.
And do you see them spirit at all, or is it just you hear it?
Yesterday was one of the first times I had the most brief flash of a face. And that's something that I know is coming more and more. I've been doing readings since 2009. I hear them very clearly. I feel their personality. I feel their symptoms. I see images that they put in my mind, but I don't see them. I see charades, Guy. It's really funny. They'll gesture and show me actions that I can describe. So to have seen this woman's face yesterday, however briefly, was a good sign of progress. We're all works in progress, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. God, there's so many questions I could branch off into here as well, and one is about the soul's evolution, because I'm thinking back to, like you say, you witnessed 9/11. What happened to your stepdaughter? Like, that was the bigger driver. Well, why is this happening? Religion wasn't giving me answers. So I'm curious to know, what answers did you receive? Like, why do things? Because there's a saying for some reason I hear, like, bad things happen to good people. There's these beliefs and sayings that are out there. And
bad things happen to all people. And these
yeah,
are so many lessons that I've learned that's life. And we as souls come here knowing we're going to have pain and pleasure, and we're going to learn from both. And we come here not for the painful lessons, like we're bad and need to learn these lessons and grow from them. No, we come here. I say it's more like art school or creative writing school or music school, where you come to learn how to make something more beautiful from what is already beautiful, the soul, and grow and create and make even better. That's what the soul comes here for. But part of being in this life is that we get so focused on the personality, the story that we're playing, the role that we're playing, that we forget that we all are direct expressions of one light, one source, one consciousness. That's the biggest teaching. This is the awakened way teaching that I teach is based on three principles. You are not only human, and I've learned that from connecting with so many souls. You're part of one big web connecting all that is. And once you really become aware of that and see the web in action, you just can't deny how we're all interconnected because we're souls. And then the third one is that the healing and creative force with a capital F of the universe is love. Not human love, but divine connection, love. And so once we realize that we are these infinite souls, you realize there is a better way to live this life. And for me, that's the awakened way, where I see you, Guy. I may have just met you, but I see you as a soul, and I can see everybody as a soul. And I know we all make mistakes, and I know bad things happen to everybody, but if we see each other soul to soul, that changes everything.
Yeah, it's a very different vantage point to be living from, isn't it?
Oh,
That's for sure.
The best.
Yeah. I think on my journey as well, the challenge was I think living from believing that to then knowing it was the big shift for me. There was,
Right.
There was a consumption of books, knowledge, meditation, frustrations, constantly coming up against yourself, but believing it in my heart to be true, but not actually experiencing it. And then once the experiential aspects come in.
That's why I also teach. I have a book coming out on April 30th with Hay House called The Awakened Way, Making the Shift to a Divinely Guided Life. And in it, I talk about the 3 E's, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's the 3 E's of living the awakened way. The first is educate yourself. And that's pretty much where everybody starts, right? We watch podcasts, we read the books, we watch the videos. And the second E is experience for yourself, because until you come to know yourself, oh, I am the light, until you have that taste of this part of you and me and everyone that never changes, that's what unites us, then it's theory. And then the third E is engage higher consciousness yourself. That's why I don't want people to come to me for readings. I want to teach them how to connect themselves. And that's not a linear path, educate, experience, engage. It's just an ongoing, what's right in this moment? Well, I think I'll go meditate and have an experience. Well, who is, I sense somebody here. Let me engage them. Who is this? And then maybe you'll go read up on that person. So it's just this beautiful path of discovery and unfolding and growth that never ends. And that to me is the most exciting thing.
Yeah, beautiful. The other thing that's really calling forward for me to talk about is guides. And it's something I haven't really talked about that much on the podcast before, even though we're nearly 300 episodes in. And I'd love to hear your take on it, because you speak about yourself, about working with guides and channeling guides and passing on their knowledge. I've had many people that channel on the podcast itself. But I've also heard you speak about as well that we all have guides and we're all supported. Yeah. So what is their role for this? How do we connect with our own guides?
All right.
That's a good place to start.
That's perfect. We need to understand that they will make their presence known to each person in a unique way. So there's no one thing that I can tell you that your guide's going to talk to you or your guide looks like this, but they will show their presence in wondrous ways. It begins with believing that they're here, at least being open to engaging them. And you do that by simply, with an open mind and an open heart. You don't even have to go into meditation. Just move to your heart and open it with a sense of wonder and playfulness. Okay, guides. So I heard that you might be here for me. I would love to have a conversation with you, or I would love for you to show me that you are really here to help me. How are you going to help me? So we don't put them to the test. We just say, how are you going to help me? And then maybe some idea pops in your mind. Or you say, all right, if I really do have a guide, I'm asking you, what sign are you going to show me that I'm guided every moment? And then you just blank your mind for a few seconds, and there an image, thought, a word will pop into your mind. And now send them some thanks, and then just go about your business and see if that sign comes up in the next 2 to 3 days. I just had one. I put my guides to the test all the time, and we were at dinner party the other night, and I had asked for a sign the other day, even though I know my guides are here. And my husband said the word that I had heard, and it was impossible that I would hear this word. And he's talking, and I went, ah! And he just looks at me, and I've made one of these signs because I gasp all the time. He's used to me, but it still stuns me. It's fun. It's wondrous. So then you can start saying, all right, so now I'm beginning to trust you're here. Will you help me with this? And more importantly, what's your advice for dealing with this situation? And just be open to how their advice and how their guidance shows up in your life. All of a sudden, you may get what I call a snag. You may be snagged by a billboard along the highway. You might be snagged by a license plate, and it has an answer that directly relates to your issue. And little by little, you start saying, well, why did I notice that just then? And you start to connect the dots that maybe there is some force that's guiding me, some creative intelligent helper that I can't see, but is showing up in wondrous ways. And the more you engage them, your life flows. You can't deny it. And give credit where it's due. That's what I say.
Yeah. And do we have a guide our whole life? Do they interchange? This seems like a silly question in some, because like I was going to say, well, what is their role? And it's to guide. But there must be a bigger, but there must be a bigger vantage point from their perspective then.
Yeah, they will be hands off until you ask, or unless you're about to stray too far off the path that you and that guide agreed to before you came into this body. So there's a concept about soul planning, and there are just too many reputable channels and intuitives who have gotten the same information that at the soul level, before we choose our parents, we sit down with other guides and higher helpers and say, what's going to give this soul the best experience this time around? What characteristics, what traits, what issues do you want to work on? Well, these parents here will be good for you, especially if you're born in this month and, in this geographic area. And your guide is going to be this being here who's been around a lot more times than you have. And you're going to, they lay out big milestones in each person's life. So the guide is with you throughout that. Because of free will, it's like a highway on a map. You can see the path from the higher perspective, and you can take little turns here and there and get off the highway a little bit and experiment and play. But if you're supposed to stay on this highway, you're going to be nudged to get back on the main path. And those nudges sometimes come through pain. I am supposed to be doing what I'm doing now. There's no doubt. I was supposed to have the career I did and meet my husband. No doubt whatsoever that the pain of Susan's passing was nothing I would want to put on anybody. But I see now that it's led me to help literally millions of people. So the nudging to be with my husband, there's so many pieces of each person's puzzle that come together and are orchestrated in ways we don't know, and the guides play a big part of that. So yes, everybody has at least one main guide from your first breath to your last. Other guides come in for certain issues that you deal with in your lifetime. Sometimes a deceased loved one will become a guide. Not always. And then people always ask, is a guardian angel the same as a guide? Many times, yes. Some people, my guides jokingly said, are more clumsy than others, and they need a dedicated guardian angel.
So when did you start channeling your guides then? And
August 1st, 2010. I can tell you the day because I remember
oh wow,
when they
okay,
when they made their. Oh no, that's when I met them. That's not when I started channeling them. I started channeling a little bit earlier than that. The main group of guides that I channel now, and who we call Sanaya, they have introduced themselves to me on August 1st, 2010. But I began channeling very unexpectedly when I was sitting with two friends, sitting quietly just to see who might come through. And all of a sudden, these beings told me to start talking, and I started talking, and this words that I never would have thought of started coming out of my mouth. And
yeah, incredible, huh?
yeah.
And who are the Sanya?
Sanaya is
Sanaya, sorry.
a collective consciousness of higher beings whose name means one worth knowing. I just did a video recently where I channeled with eyes open, and it's a whole new level of connection with them that I'm enjoying now as we go into a whole new way of working with them. I just heard somebody ask a question the other day, why bother channeling? Because you can access a much higher level of clarity than when we just speak from this level at the human level. And the energy, oh my gosh, Guy, when people attend my channeling sessions online or in person, we all feel this tangible higher energy, and people have been physically healed during those sessions. People sometimes cry, people hear what they need to hear. And so even though it's a very strange thing to engage in, I can't deny the benefit to all of us.
Yeah, I'm prodding as well for selfish reasons for me as well as the listeners, because I mentioned off air that I run workshops and we hold space, and like I said, generally up to about 100 people come at a time. And there's a moment where the energy is so profound when I'm holding space in a meditation, and that channeling energy comes through, and it's all quite still, like I feel like a child, in just like awe and wonder all the time. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, and I look at people, do you feel that? Do you experience that too? It's,
oh yes. Yeah.
No, I hear you. It's there. I feel it. I'm curious though. There seems to be, I don't know whether it's because technology is connecting us more than more, but there seems to be a lot of, or it's just my perception of reality is shifted focus, but there seems to be a lot of channeling. There's a lot of messages wanting to get through at this particular point.
It is because we're ripe for it. People are hungry, like you said, to know there's something more than this, that there is a better way, the awakened way, like I say, to wake up and say, we're not only human, and that if we ask, is there higher guidance we can access? We find out that wisdom will be right here for each of us. And they're all saying the same thing. It's all about love and connection, and connecting with each other and honoring the souls in each other. If the channeling does not address love, if it is not helpful, then that is not real channeling.
Yeah. So what do you feel is going on with humanity right now then? Are we truly going through a shift? Do you think that it's a unique time in history? There's a lot of opinions that are happening.
Humanity has been going through a shift since humanity began. That's what it's all about. It's all about raising consciousness. But I do feel that because more people are now acknowledging that it is all about consciousness, and we really are all connected through the education, through the technology that's helping us become aware of our interconnectedness, that it is accelerating people's own awakening. And that's a beautiful thing. We're going to be far less tolerant of people who are not kind to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating. What would your advice be then to people that are listening to this and are in a place of, I guess, wanting to live a life that is more guided? to surrender more to that.
Right.
But
Yeah, without a
yeah,
doubt, start with some kind of practice that allows you to listen to your own thoughts, and then listen to what comes up between those thoughts. So I recommend what I call the sip of the divine. It's a 3-minute practice. I have a YouTube video about it called No More Meditation Excuses. So you can search by that title. And it encourages everybody to spend 3 minutes a day. That's all. Just sitting quietly and watching your thoughts. And you start to notice how the thoughts are always the same and how they're going to come up whether you push them away or not. And then you start noticing those. And then you suddenly start noticing there is something that's noticing the noticing. What is that? And then in this practice, you're given the chance to ask a question. If there is higher wisdom here, what is it I need to know right now? And you become quiet in between the thoughts, and all of a sudden insights come. People don't bother to take the time to be quiet, to listen, and to ask. That's the engaging part. And just that simple practice, do that for 3 weeks every day. And you might start spending 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And it doesn't need to be some big, okay, then an hour. No, not too many people have time for that today. But 5-10 minutes a day of listening will change your life. And then listen to the guidance where you go next with this. Right?
yeah, start to open up to the adventure. I think the challenge can be, though, that when we're so conditioned, we're so coming up against ourselves, especially when it comes to careers and choice points in life and moving in that, there's certainly, it was for me anyway, an element of courage of having to muster to, okay, I've really got to, if I'm going to learn courage, trust, and surrender, then I really need to actually apply them in my life to see what happens if I am truly guided, if I am truly supported, and to see what shows up from that.
Well, I have a recording that is channeled from Sanaya with some beautiful channeled music that accompanies it. It's on the gifts page on my website called The Journey of Remembrance. It is so beautiful. I was going through a hard day a little while ago, and I heard the guidance, listen to your own recording. And it just brought me right back home with a capital H. And they go through what the guides call the 7 sacred aspects of the soul. And one of them is courage. So courage is innately within all of us. And so you're right. You find it by saying, well, if it's already here, then I don't have to do anything to gain courage. I just have to trust. It is a journey, and it's like we're these onions peeling back layer after layer to discover what's been here all along, the courage and peace and strength and love.
Yeah. Does the soul have an endpoint in terms of its experiential education? If we are a soul and that we come back to continue to learn, like you say, that and create the tapestry of life and experiential.
Many people say, I'm never coming back. I don't want to do this again. So when I say it does not have an endpoint, I'm not talking about the human part. I'm talking about the trajectory of spirit in expression is ever onward, ever upward. So you most likely will come back and have another life in human form. But when you've really mastered being the presence of love, then maybe you will be a spirit guide for someone else. And onward it goes. And if it's not joyous, then we need to find out why not and go within. That doesn't mean that, we're on this path and we're doing all of these practices. Is our life fully joyful? No. But when it's not joyful, you have greater understanding, compassion, and this too shall pass. There's an underlying joy that's not comparable to human joy. There's this underlying awareness. I am this awareness, and nothing can take that away. And that's joy.
Yeah. Do you feel then that it's funny, you hear people, life is meant to be hard and challenging and like, but then
No, it's not
that
meant to be. It just turns out to be that way for
that
some,
way.
right?
Oh
And
yeah.
at many times throughout our lives, that's just the way it is here.
Yeah, and then but you'll hear certain gurus and different people saying like life should be a state of bliss and ecstasy
No, that's
and
wrong too.
from that point for
Life can be, but no shoulds. It can be. Yeah.
yeah, from that point, fair enough, fair enough. What principles do you live your life by? Like how does your routines look like? How do you stay on, I guess, point within coming from you're clearly a heart-centered
It comes from
person.
over a decade now of my greatest desire. When I first started out, didn't realize I'd be a spiritual teacher. It was all about helping people to know that their loved ones are still here. As a medium, getting the clearest possible connection. And I realized that in order to do that, I needed to raise my own vibration and raise my own consciousness. So I really became good at noticing when I was pushing other people's buttons. And when people push my button to make me angry, why? And so I really learned to clear out the gunk. And I really am aware when I'm not aligned with love. And when you do that moment by moment for years, it becomes your way of life. And years ago, if someone had told me I would love everybody, I'd say, I don't know if that's possible, but it is. And that is joy. And so my daily way of living is to get down and dirty and be very human at times. And I don't know if you know about Navy people, but we can curse like sailors at times, you know. So I can drop an F-bomb on you if I get upset. But it's usually when I'm shocked by something, stunned, scared, frightened, boom, you know, the instant body's reaction, I'll drop an F-bomb. But oh, wow, yeah. Yesterday, my husband bumped into a shelf and one of our favorite glass ornaments fell on the floor and broke. And my reaction was just, I slammed my hand against the door in frustration, but no F-bombs. I just realized that was a miracle. Maybe we're on a new path. But I didn't get mad at him. See, that's the change. It's just like, well, that could have been me just as easily. And, you know, so my life is just, how can I be the presence of love? And then my passion is to find better ways of explaining spiritual truths to people. And so to that end, I'm writing and I have 2 books coming out in the next year. So a lot going on. I'm teaching classes and planning for the next class. So my husband will tell you, I might be a little obsessed with all of this, but it's joy. I wouldn't want to not do it, you know, because it brings so much joy. But I tried to balance that with being a good wife. Let's go hiking or let's go do this together. And I really force myself to make time for us and our dogs. You know?
Yeah, it's finding that balance, isn't it? Like I was sharing off air, we just had my son, so I got 2 children, daughter and a son. One's 3.5, and my son is now a month old. And you probably could tell this is my first podcast back since the chaos of it all. But
it's wonderful.
The dance I find is like when I'm a dad, I'm a dad, you know, I'm fully present and embracing all the sleepless nights, the challenges, my daughter never listening to me and running off or doing these things and just the chaos of it all. And then all of a sudden being of service in a retreat space and it's a completely different environment. And like you say, then that feels like it's my soul's purpose, but also being home present in this moment is my soul's purpose too. And it's actually continually reminding myself it is what it is and be here now.
I love that you said that being the dad and the husband is your soul's purpose. And that's right, because so many people, they think, oh, well, I have to change the world. No, your soul came to be the
Mm.
presence of love, to shine your light. And there's no better way to do that than the person you're with at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a big lesson for me. It really has, because when selling my company and stepping into the unknown, of like quite often there's a fear driving the courage as well, because there's this dance of all this uncertainty, and it's like so there's this huge drive to achieve, even though you might not tell yourself that, but at the same time, as that happens, you kind of relinquish the grasp of it, and actually there becomes a much more internal peace with it all, and it is what it is, which has then opened it up even more in a strange way as well. So it's been some critical lessons along the way, but I see a lot of people doing that push to get to, I guess, the experience of spirituality, when, like you say, it's about coming back to the moment and appreciating what we have in that. It's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for me to be sharing that for myself right now.
Come bet.
Yeah, thank you. What last question I want to ask you for the show, Suzanne, is that we've covered many topics today and a lot of ground, but is there anything you'd like to share with the listeners for them to ponder on before we wrap it up?
The greatest question anybody can ask is, who am I? Because we limit ourselves so much, don't we, by thinking I'm just this story that I'm living. State your name, right? I am the Suzanne story, the Guy story, and everybody who's listening. And before you start down this path, you think, well, what else is there? But if you become open to saying, well, I'm also this soul that's much greater, okay, that's another level of you. But could you be even more than that? Well, what's more than that? Well, what if you're a direct expression of Source, God? People are afraid to say that, but what is the soul? The soul is to Source what the human is to the soul. We're all just, what we have here is limitless expressions of the light, and then more and more limitations. Being in human form is incredibly restricted. You've heard of the term an RSS feed, right? Do you know what that is in technology terms? Like, I have these daily messages from Spirit that go out in the Awakened Way app that people can get for free online, and in my Daily Way messages. That goes out from an RSS feed. I update the website and boom, it goes out to the world. Well, I just realized that we're feeding ourselves a story, and we are the RSS, the restricted sense of self. That's what the human is, restricted sense of self. And the soul is far less restricted. When we shift our perspective and say, well, what if I'm not just this body? What does that mean for me? What does it help me? How does that help me to live my life? So, and if I'm more than the soul, what if I really am the I am, and you are too, and you are too? Well, then why would I want to fight with you? Why would I even argue with you? I see you. It's just, ask the question, who am I? And that answer will continue to change as we peel back the layers of the self with a capital S.
Yeah, beautiful. And where can we send people your main website? I'll make sure the link's in the show notes for everyone.
Yeah, SuzanneGiesemann.com. And I do classes online and in-person workshops. I'm doing a cruise to the Mediterranean in September, where we'll be doing 14 hours of workshops and having a good time cruising around, visiting different countries. So all kinds of.
Of course, you're going on a boat. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I deeply appreciate it. It was lovely to connect. And I've
you did a great job with baby thoughts running through your head.
It's funny. I did feel a bit rusty this morning, Suzanne, I'll be honest, but I'm so happy to have connected and be here.
Same
so
here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, my lovely.